I'm reading this Geisha, A Life by Mineko Iwasaki with Rand Brown, and it's New York Times bestseller. And you see this WSP Washington Square Press Readers Club. So born in 1941, you can see the photo. Mineko Iwasaki was Japan's star geisha until she retired at the age of 29. She now lives in a Kyoto suburb with her family. And Rand Brown, a renowned Japanese to English translator, is the founder of East West Communications as well as a founding board member of Tricycle, the Buddhist Review. And this is the ISBN number for you to see. It is really interesting. It's a biography and an autobiography, whatever you may call. It is featuring like no woman in 300-year history of the Karyukai has ever come forward in public to tell her story until now. Many say I was the best geisha of my generation, writes Mineko Iwasaki, and yet it was a life that I found too constricting to continue, and one that I ultimately had to leave. Trained to become a geisha from the age of 5, Iwasaki would live among the other women of art in Kyoto's Gion-Kobu district and practice the ancient customs of Japanese entertainment. She was loved by kings, princes, military heroes, and wealthy statesmen alike. But even though she became one of the most prized geishas in Japan's history, Iwasaki wanted more her own life, and by the time she retired at age 29, Iwasaki was finally on her way towards a new beginning. Geisha, A Life, is her story, at times heartbreaking, always awe-inspiring, and totally true. So this book gives an insight into the Japanese culture. She writes, I find great irony in my choice of profession. A first-class Gieko is constantly in the glare of spotlights, while I spent much of my childhood hiding in a darkened closet. A first-class Gieko uses all the skills at her command to please her audience, to make every person she comes in contact with feel wonderful, while I prefer solitary pursuits. A first-class Gieko is an exquisite willow tree who bends to the service of others, while I've always been stubborn and contrary by nature and very, very proud. While a first-class Gieko is a master of creating an atmosphere of relaxation and amusement, I don't particularly enjoy being with other people, she writes. A star Gieko is never ever alone, and I always wanted to be by myself. Odd, isn't it? It's almost as if I was deliberately choosing the most difficult path for myself, one that would force me to face and overcome my personal obstacles. In fact, if I hadn't entered the Karyukai, I think I would have become a Buddhist nun or a policewoman. It is difficult to explain why I made the decision to enter the Karyukai when I was such a little girl. Why would a small child who adores her parents decide by herself to leave them? Yet, I was the one who chose to enter this profession and this workplace, thus betraying my parents. Let me tell you how it happened, and maybe the reasons will become more transparent in the telling. So this is from Geisha, A Life. So in the preface she writes, in the country of Japan, an island nation in East Asia, there are special districts known as Karyukai that are dedicated to the enjoyment of aesthetic pleasure. These are the communities where the professionally trained female artists known as geisha live and work. Karyukai means the flower and willow world. Each geisha is like a flower, beautiful in her own way, and like a willow tree, gracious, flexible, and strong. No woman in the 300-year history of the Karyukai has ever come forward in public to tell a story. We have been constrained by unwritten rules not to do so, by the robes of tradition, and by the sanctity of our exclusive calling. So she felt the need to talk, and that is how she wrote this autobiography with the help of Rand Brown. So she says, it's a story that I have long wanted to tell. My name is Mineko. This is not the name my father gave me when I was born. It is my professional name. I got it when I was 5 years old. It was given to me by the head of the family of women who raised me in the geisha tradition. The surname of the family is Iwasaki. I was legally adopted as the heir to the name and successor to ownership of the business and its holding when I was 10 years old. I started my career very early. Events that happened when I was only 3 years old convinced me that it was what I was meant to do. I moved into the Iwasaki geisha house when I was 5 and began my artistic training when I was 6. I adored the dance. It became my passion and object of greatest devotion. It was determined to become the best. I was determined to become the best, and I did. The dance is what kept me going when the other requirements of the profession felt too heavy to bear. Literally, I weigh 90 pounds. A full kimono with hair ornaments can easily weigh 40 pounds. It was a lot to carry. I would have been happy just to dance, but the exigencies of the system forced me to debut as an adolescent geisha, a Mineko, when I was 15. She's shown a picture of a hairdo. So this is the tortoise shell comb. This is the red silk frontal band. This is the silver flutters. This is the opal hairpin. This is the kanoko pin. And this is the tortoise shell hairpin. And this is known as war shinobu hairstyle. And then you have Suzuki, that is August flower. Look at this. Then you have kanoko. This is kanoko. And then you have the jade hairpin. So just imagine how much you carry on your head. That's what she was saying. The Iwasaki geisha house was located in the Gion-Kobu district of Kyoto, the most famous and traditional karyukai of them all. This is the community in which I spent the entirety of my professional career. In Gion-Kobu, we don't refer to ourselves as geisha, meaning artist, but we use a more specific term, that is gieko, women of art. One type of geiko famed throughout the world as a symbol of Kyoto is the young dancer known as Mineko, or women of dance. Accordingly, I will use the term gieko and Mineko throughout the rest of this book. When I was 20, I turned my collar. So turned my collar within inverted commas means the rite of passage that signals the transformation from Mineko to adult gieko. As I matured in the profession, I became increasingly disillusioned with the intransigence of the archaic system and tried to initiate reforms that would increase the educational opportunities, financial independence, and professional rights of the women who worked there. I was so discouraged by my inability to effect change that I finally decided to abdicate my position and retire, which, to the horror of the establishment, I did at the height of my success when I was 29 years old. I closed down the Iwasaki Geisha house, then under my control, packed up the priceless kimono and jeweled ornaments contained within, and left Gion Kobu. I married and am now raising a family. I lived at the Karyukai during the 1960s and 70s, a time when Japan was undergoing the radical transformation from a post feudal to a modern society. But I existed in a world apart, a special realm whose mission and identity depended on persevering dependent on preserving the time-honored tradition of the past, and I was a fully committed to doing so. Maiko and Gieko start off their careers living and training in an establishment called Okia, that is a lodging house, usually translated as Geisha house. They follow an extremely rigorous regimen of constant classes and rehearsals similar in intensity to that of a prima ballerina, concert pianist, or opera singer in the West. The proprietress of the Okia supports the Gieko fully in her efforts to become a professional and then helps manage her career once she makes her debut. The young Gieko lives in the Okia for a contracted period of time, usually 5 to 7 years, during which time she repays the Okia for its investment. She then becomes independent and moves out on her own through the through sh- though she continues to maintain an agency relationship with her sponsoring Okia. The exception to this is a Gieko who has been designated as an Atatori, an heir to the house, its successor. She carries the last name of the Okia, either through birth or adoption, and lives in the Okia throughout her career. Maiko and Gieko perform at very exclusive banquet facilities known as Ocharya, often translated literally as tea houses. Here, she writes, we entertain regularly at private parties for select groups of invited patrons. We also appear publicly in a series of annual performance events. The most famous of these is Miyako Odori, that is cherry dancers. The dance programs are quite spectacular and draw enthusiastic audiences from all over the world. The Miyako Odori takes place for the month of April in our own theatre, and there is much mystery and misunderstanding about what it means to be a geisha, or in my case, a gieko. I hope my story will help explain what it's really like, and also serve as a record of this unique component of Japan's cultural history. So she wants to say that these geishas are not prostitutes as people believe them to be, and that is exactly what she has conveyed in this autobiography of hers. It's really poignant, and it's good to read. I mean, one should read to know. You'll get an insight into a life of what a geisha is. It's really racy, very interesting. Also, you have this Readers Club Guide, the WSP Readers Club Guide, that guides you with some questions that come to your mind. So, look, these are some of the questions, and the second question says, how did you decide which memories from your life would be included in this book and which would be left out? Were there certain ideas or themes that you knew you wanted to address before you began writing? And she answers, I did not make a conscious decision about what stories to tell, but I have many, many more that could and I hope will be told. From the beginning, I wanted to stress the fact that geishas are consummate artists, fully committed to the highest standards of professionalism. I also hoped to dispel the myth once and for all that geishas are prostitutes. So basically, she wants the world to know about the Japanese culture. And to this question, like for example, do you think that geisha tradition has any place in the modern world? What would have to change for it to survive? So she answers, I think it's crucial that the tradition survive as a living testament to the greatness of classical Japanese culture. It has to become easier for the general population to have access to the world of the geisha if it is to survive. I think there should be more events organized by the Performers Association where anyone who wants to can experience geisha culture up close. And there's so many questions that she has addressed in this book. So according to me, it's a very informative read, and the way it's written is simple and easy to, I mean, it's you won't put down the book until you finish it. So happy reading.